Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth monthly Open Data Leaders Meetup. This is a lot of new faces, so that's good to see, but we usually have a group of enthusiasts. So, for those of you who have not been here before, this is run by the Center for Data Innovation. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy think tank focusing on data, technology, public policy. Open data kind of falls in right in the center of that diagram. So we're very happy to have David Portnoy of HHS here today. He's an external innovation fellow. He's going to be talking about demand-driven open data. And just a little bit of logistic stuff before we get started. So next month is our Part 2 HHS meetup. We're going to have Damon Davis talking about healthdata.gov. He can probably tell you better than I can about what he'll be talking about. But thanks to David for coming in from, you're Chicago-based, correct? So we're very happy to have him. I think this is very important as well. And just a fun fact, if any of you were here at the meetup we had about 2 months ago with NOAA, just 2 days ago actually, Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker announced the first piloting phase, I suppose you'd call it, of NOAA's big data partnership, which was talked about here. And perhaps our Microsoft friends know a little bit more about that because they're involved. But just very cool, just kind of goes to show how important it is to get people in the same room together. You can learn about these things months in advance. So before we get into it, who here is from, just a whole audience, who here is a government contractor? A couple people. Who here is public sector? Academia? Journalism? And actually, this is one of the first times this happened, who has started a business with open data? Who's a young, innovative entrepreneur? Excellent. That is what we love to see. That's one of the main reasons we do this. So, without too much further ado, and just to mark the calendars, May 28th is the date for David's presentation, or for Dan, excuse me. For Part 2 of HHS, and then coming up in June, I'm trying to rope down NASA to come in to talk about their open data efforts. But again, as always, if any of you have federal open data contacts, please send them my way. I will harass them. I will try to get them here. I won't tie your name to it, but that would be much appreciated. So feel free to help yourself to food. I'll leave a business card and official on the back. We'll put you on our newsletter, take business cards, take stickers, mingle. So, and David, take it away. Okay.
Plug you in now.
Everybody close your eyes. Is it not on?
It's not
Do
showing.
you have to do like a push to projector or something?
I guess I should have taken some time to set it up. That's a rare displays. I'm gonna try this one out. We might have to use our imagination.
Hopefully not. We've had this before. You think? Let me try this. Something. There we go.
Ah.
Information technology.
Ta-da. Hey, it works. Okay. All right, so before I get started, this is like the most exciting topic you guys will ever hear. I wanted to give a shout out to the institution that brought me here. I can tell you about it, but I think I wouldn't do it justice, so can I put you on the spot or should I?
Sure.
Okay.
So just quickly, I'm David Davis again with HHS in the CTO's office, which we've now rebranded to be the Idea Lab. The basic premise is we want to innovate the ways that government does the business of government. We want to make government more modern and effective. So one of the ways that we try to do that is by bringing in external expertise into the department to help us solve problems that we've identified. So David comes to us through an entrepreneur in residence program that we've put together, where basically we've tried to identify a need, put out a solicitation for folks who have the skill sets that might be able to meet that need, and then put those qualified people in place to try to solve the problem. So Idea Lab, you can find online at hhs.gov/idealab, and you can read a lot more about a broader set of initiatives that we have that are trying to innovate on how HHS is doing our job, but you'll also notice too that the administration is trying to proliferate Idea Labs across government. So you're going to start to see more and more Idea Labs come up in other departments as we try to make government more effective in the business of delivering services to the people. So.
And one other thing is this program is also taking applications, right, over, so.
Yeah, it's always, there's a lot of openness to applications, and sometimes you may be able to identify a situation that you think you may have a skill set for solving, and so we're always open to that bi-directional conversation as to what it is that you would love to see fixed, what your skill set is that you think could be addressing that problem, and we can have a further conversation. So again, hhs.gov/idealab.
Very good. So I will try to be brief in the talk. I don't like to do too many slides, and since this is a relatively small group, I think we can kind of focus on the things that brought you here. I think that'd be the most fun. So that we're ready to shut up. So why are we here, and what is this about? About 132,000 data sets on data.gov. I think it's just a fraction of what could be there, so we're just getting going. And the question we need to ask is, what happens when the government does not have a feedback loop into the value of a particular data set? The end result is what gets put out there is the data sets that are easiest and least risky. So that's the problem that we are trying to solve. We are looking for an engaged and active user community. We want to maximize the value of the data assets that are already there. They're all locked throughout the government. We want to be able to make them as valuable as possible. And in the process, we also want to help the government prioritize its open data initiatives. It's nice to say, yeah, we want everything to be open, but the reality of it is that this takes a lot of resources. And so, sure, eventually we want everything to be open, but in the meantime, let's prioritize. So, DDoD, and I came up with a really cool name, but I think like Dan was like, this is the government, we gotta have the acronyms. So.
That is so not true.
Oh,
I
said,
never do that.
Okay. All right. So demand-driven open data, and what it is at its root, it's really super simple. It is a way to tell HHS what data you need. The thing that makes it different from before is that it is systematic, it's ongoing, and it's transparent. Each one of those adjectives are really core to the way it operates. So we'll cover that. And what we do, what it advocates for, is to manage all of the open data projects in the form of use cases. So that means you find the customer first, you find the application first, and you develop to that application so that you know when you're done. You know that when you put something out, there is already a customer for it, and it's that customer that can say, yes, indeed, you have delivered the value to me. And this is kind of an interesting finding that we had. Initially, we thought, okay, great, let's just go for it. We'll let people put in their use cases, and we'll probably just get a bunch of requests for new data sets that are not even out there. What we found is actually quite different. The vast majority of the requests, and right now we have 26 use cases, are for something that's much simpler. It's to make a tiny incremental improvement in what people are already getting. Maybe something as simple as getting a commitment to a regular refresh rate, or getting the data provenance explained, and a better data dictionary, or adding a field that would match one data set to another data set. So anything that's down below, this is an opportunity to really have a high impact with low investment. You knew this was coming, right? We have to have some sort of process chart. So 3 actors: the data user or the requester. That's hopefully you guys. The administrator, that is me and us in the Idea Lab. The data owner in the government, or the program owner. The main thing to take away from it is that the middle tier here is just a facilitator. We're just there to make sure that the process moves along smoothly. All of the actual prioritization and the decision and the implementation happens here. It's a different concept from prior incarnations with things like FOIA requests and other approaches which were mandated. In this particular case, what we're doing is we are reaching out to the program owners, and we are finding win-win relationships. We are getting them that market signal, that all-important feedback into how their data is used and how it's important. We're giving them justification for their business cases. And of course, we're providing a very valuable service to the user community as well. So I think that might be the end of the boring part. Very easy. You can go to demand-driven-open-data.github.io if you want to get started, or if you don't want to type a lot, it's ddod.us. This tells you everything you need to know to get started. It gives you a link to the use cases, the specifications, explanation that's much longer than the few slides that you just saw. This is a quick, at a glance view of where we are with the use cases so far. And let me just take you into a few over here. So right now, what you'll see is that everything is managed in GitHub. And we started off with a premise that we want to get the customer first and prove out this whole concept before developing any purpose-built systems. And doing everything, managing all of this information through GitHub lets us maintain total and complete transparency. So it's pretty sweet. And as I've been learning this week, Google has been indexing this like crazy. So I was really impressed that I accidentally Googled myself without knowing it. So any one of these use cases you can go into. Here's one for medical device recall, so it's associated with the FDA. You could go to the specifications. Usually what we have is a description of what is this all about. We always ask for the value to the customer. So how core is this to the operation of your business? How core is this to your research? The value to the industry or the public. So how important is this to your peers or perhaps to public health? And as I mentioned before, the vast majority of times, we're dealing with subject matter experts. So they have used this data before. Sometimes they know the data that HHS has better than people at HHS do. So we have them identify the data sources that they currently use and the limitations that they're finding, because this is a really great starting point. And then we have them identify the specifications. What do they want to see ideally? What are the fields? What's the update frequency? What's the transport mechanism? Everything has a log, so as I mentioned, it's completely transparent. So here is a log of all the communications that happen between the parties. A link to the solution. So what happens typically is that there are short-term workarounds. In order to get things going, it might be that the data already exists somewhere that people are just not familiar with. It might be explaining how to interpret the data and identifying the steps to actually process it. It might not be ideal because you have to go through some manual steps, but at least just to get people going. In some cases, and we can get into this in a little bit, the short-term solution might be to submit FOIA requests. Is there somebody here who doesn't know what FOIA is? The Freedom of Information Act? So it's a request that you can submit to the government. They basically have to respond to you if it's reasonable. And in some cases, by going through FOIA, you are more likely to get what you want than if you were expecting them to produce something proactively. The beauty of this approach is that we can provide you information that overcomes the typical limitations and frustrations with FOIA. So we can identify what is the system of record, who is the individual that would be pulling this. Maybe even what is the query code. And by having all that information, not only do you get your request faster, but you get past the big issue of having inconsistent data flows from one request to the other. And then the longer term solutions typically involve a commitment to a particular release. So in this case, they're looking for May. It also involves getting the user more on board. So they might have access to do pre-release validation on some of this data that's coming up, which would be, we found very valuable for them to start basically coding for it or modifying their product before they release. And similarly, this is a very valuable service for the data owners because they have a reality check before putting something out there. And finally, if we go to data.gov, or excuse me, healthdata.gov, we, for the use cases, we put out links. So here's the medical device recall, and here's the link back to the use case. The reason we do this is because this is the kind of de facto portal. This is the entryway for most people who are looking for health data. And we want people to find this use case. So even before it's complete, we want people to come and see that there's already somebody who is asking for this, and ideally add their requirements to the live use case. The more input, the more users that we have on a particular use case, I think the more of a compelling scenario we can make to the data owners. And I think that's it, so I'll just open it up.
Yeah, I have a question about how you decided to implement this. So it was maybe just a point of confusion, but what's the reason to have a GitHub issue and then different GitHub pages for the solution and for the specification? Does that make sense? Like I see, I submit an issue and then you create new pages. It just was a little
Right.
confusing.
So one of the biggest things that we need to overcome, first of all,
Sure.
is in order for this to scale, we need this to be easier to use. So we need the learning curve to be much easier. What happens now is that we're using a very general purpose tool to do a very specific task. What we're doing is not ideal, but I'll answer your question. The reason that we use the issues is that so that we have a easy sequential record of all of the conversations. We had data owners actually say, you know what, we're already getting these calls from any number of users. We have no idea like who's receiving these, who in our organization is receiving these calls and what they're telling them. This is a way to make everything completely transparent, right, and accountable. The reason that we have the specifications and the solution in separate pages is because that just lends itself better. Those are more wiki-like. We also allow the users to make their own modifications. Actually, in order for this to scale in the short term, we want both the users and the owners to go and have at it. We're actually talking with some other organizations within the government who has started also working on a community and feedback solution, except instead of going to the customer first, they're saying, you know what, let's build the tool first because we know what's needed, so we'll build a tool and accommodate a lot of different agencies. So what we're looking to do is kind of marry the two approaches sometime soon.
That makes sense, and that's very helpful. Follow-up, do you see that people are asking questions for data that's actually out there but just maybe hard to find? Or is it really people that have really looked and they're just what they need isn't necessarily out there?
Now, people who are in the use cases, they know what they want.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, one of the longest lead times in the whole process is finding the right individuals within the bowels of HHS who can actually be responsible for the data. So the external users, the ones that are coming to this, actually often know better what HHS should have than a lot of other people from HHS.
The Office of National Coordinator has those FACAs, the Federal Advisory Committees, and some of them are interoperability and data. Are they giving you feedback or actually testing out the model with some of their bright ideas?
Would you like to, David?
I don't think so. So the FACAs tend to be more focused on electronic health record data transformation, whereas this effort is predominantly focused on HHS open data across our resources from within the department. There's a lot of really smart people on those FACAs, though. It'd be interesting to see what they think of this, but we're not necessarily getting feedback from them at all. So we're getting feedback from you.
Yeah, I think a lot of those. I was in on one of those, right? Was that a FACA that I was in?
I don't believe so. Which one are you talking about?
A couple months ago at NCHS. That one. Okay.
Actually, no, maybe that is a problem. But it's not an ONC. I think that's what's stuck in my mind.
Oh, okay.
So there's a National Center for Health Statistics work group on data access and use. And they are...
Which is a federal advisory committee.
Yeah, and it is, it's strategically positioned to provide input to the Secretary on open data initiatives from a FOC perspective. So yes, you're right, and yes, they're providing us input, but no, they're not with ONC.
Yeah, I think the kind of recommendations, if I recall correctly, they're much more high level and abstract, which is important for long-term planning. This is much more immediate, and this is like, get me the data now kind of thing. So,
Just as a run-on question, then PCAST, the Presidential Committee on Science and Technology, wrote a pretty robust, daggered report saying, government, you should do this, that, and the other thing. Are those type ideas percolating in your direction?
nobody
Yeah.
tells me anything, so I don't know.
Yeah. So we brought David in to specifically focus on this feedback loop piece, but absolutely the Idea Lab, the Open Data Initiative are paying attention to PCAST because they're trying to derive not just how government does open data, data management, all kinds of, interesting components, but like government is very much many times at the forefront of how the rest of industry and the private sector end up doing things. So we're definitely paying attention to those kinds of inputs because they're incredibly valuable towards driving innovation from the public space.
Yeah, about two things. One, it's very interesting that you're using GitHub. And one of the things that, while we in the normal culture of use of GitHub is for an open source project, is that people fork things, make enhancements to them, and push the forks back to the original owners, possibly with some confidence, say, hey, I made what I think is an improvement to what you have here. Feel free to blend it back into the mainstream if you want. You and I were talking before this meeting starting that, not from your site, but from another CMS site, I'm taking some data. I'm going to need to write some R and SQL code to merge it with some census and Dartmouth Atlas information. I'd be happy to push the code and the enhanced data set back to you, but you don't seem to be asking me to do that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting use case, actually. I mean, and I don't mean use case in the form of DoD, but that's absolutely something that would be beneficial to the broader data community. The fact that you've produced this new data artifact better than it was previously put out there. I don't know that we necessarily have the capability to receive that kind of stuff. We do in
I
this.
just meant that the platform you're using supports that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a really good point.
Right, and actually, you don't even need to fork it, because we do have Jekyll's site, but what you've seen, all the specifications, are actually on GitHub Wiki repository, so you can go ahead and add your own thing. You don't even have to fork it and do a pull request. Does that make sense?
Well, I just meant in terms of me pushing code and data back to you.
Right, yeah, so,
The other thing I was curious about, and I've had some federal clients that have been FOIA'd and had to produce public use files, and my clients were used to thinking of it as a burden, not an opportunity. And I can imagine, given tight federal resources and, they scarcely data scientists too, of having places within CMS, basically do something that looked like a Kaggle competition, and say, hey, we're trying to find out X, here's a bunch of data, go to it.
right, so,
Well, here's the criteria, we'll award somebody a prize.
so
Have any thought of that?
let me answer your question with a completely different topic. So when it comes to FOIA, if you recall, I mentioned earlier that this is the first time that people have a systematic way of telling HHS what they want. So I lied, total lie. FOIA was a way to do it, but FOIA is not set up to handle requests like this. It doesn't do well with requests that are for data that continues to be produced, that is machine readable, that is structured. Their goal is to fulfill your request as quickly as possible in any way possible. It might be that you will get a scan of a PDF and it'll be a bunch of black lines redacted, and then that'll be sufficient. What this says is, you know what, as long as you're doing this, and as long as you, there's a need for that. So we've actually been talking to FOIA departments throughout all the agencies to see how we can basically work together for the requests that do fit that mold, that is for machine readable and structured data.
I want to follow directly on your comments. I started a startup company, Open Data Nation, to do a lot of things you're requesting. In our pilot project, working with the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, we tried to do this, pull requests back on GitHub to modify their data sets, and one of the big issues that they confronted in actually putting this into fruition was that the data quality then gets called into question, decisions that individuals made outside of the city agency, they then have to remake and review and reincorporate. It's not just as simple as making a fork and accepting the pull request. Like, somebody in the city agency has to be responsible for accepting your pull request. So that was just a functional hurdle that, if you were to consider something like this, at least from our experience, was a problem to implement in a city agency. Secondly, I think to your point about why not do a challenge around this, like it seems like there's like a general population of people who are ready to jump at an opportunity to contribute. And I think, just from my sense of things, that there seems to be a lack of like a social service sector or consulting sector that helps bridge between people who are ready to jump at the opportunity and city agencies, federal agencies, departments that have data and have these questions. It's hugely admirable that you've done this within agency, and I think that the Ideas Lab is an interesting model. But I'd be interested to hear your feedback and know about the kind of space, if there is one, for bridging. Who's bridging between y'all and these kind of willing actors? Sorry to put a big question.
Do you want to?
No, it's huge. There was a lot of different things in there. So I want to go back to the data quality thing, because it's something that we address even with some of our own data. So, excuse me, as an example, our Human Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, takes back a lot of data from their grantees. And those grantees are not necessarily invested in the quality of the data that, in the same way that we would be at the federal level. Pardon me. So one of the challenges that we had to surmount with healthdata.gov was the ability to put the data out, but also remove their requirement as an agency to attest to its privacy and its data quality. So we have a back-end piece that allows us to do that. But you raise a really excellent point there. But it would be also interesting if the community is now using data that is contributing back to each other. Basically, that's understood to be communal data, because when we put it out, we want you to do all kinds of creative stuff with it. And if you're going to make it better in some way, form, or fashion, then the community is willing to accept it in the way that it is. Yeah, you're right. You did a good job, and this is something I can use. Great. And it may be that ends up being like the secondary resource that people all actually automatically return to. And obviously, we would want to be the ones producing high-quality data that's usable.
Just to keep this rolling for a minute, is that my specific use case was to link CMS data to census data with Dartmouth Atlas shapefiles. So I wasn't generating new data, just contributing the code back, because it's taken me some time to figure out how to do that. Might be something that somebody else would want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that BART gives away some quality indicator software, but it's written in SAS, so you need to go out and buy SAS first if you want to use that.
So another thing that we've also contemplated is sort of, we really celebrate sort of the apps, tools, and services that are developed off of open data. But it's an interesting use case, actually, to think just quite literally, how has somebody made the data better? And if you have a gallery of the alternative uses of data, maybe they don't all need to be an app or a service. Maybe some of them should be, here's how the data was made better, right? Because it merges together multiple sources from census and other bureaus and things like that. That's actually a very interesting...
And by the way, most data science will tell you that 80% of the time they're spending rearranging and merging data. Relatively little time is hitting the button and run regression.
I actually really like that idea, because we do hear about a lot of people who are spending tremendous amounts of time massaging data into something that's even usable before it can be in the product that's, applicable for whatever the problem is they're trying to solve. So this is an interesting scenario where you allow people to contribute back data that they've made better for the community to then use it for an alternative purpose.
Or what they did to massage the data.
Yeah, right. And that's a good point too.
Is extremely good.
That's a good point too, actually. There's a lot of researchers out there that are doing work on data, and all of the code that allows them to arrive at the findings that they found. The code should be as out there as well as the findings and the data source,
And frankly,
such that you can...
You need the code to figure out whether you should believe the output.
Right. That's exactly right. Right. Reproducible. How is it sort of massageable into something that's directly applicable to me. We may be in the same industry and we're on sort of two different trajectories. But if your code is applicable to what I'm trying to solve, then that's an opportunity as well.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's great.
So the point I was trying to make is that HHS or an agency would have to have some resource in-house to re-accept that data if they
Yeah.
ultimately
Yeah,
want to
somebody-
take ownership of it, to say, well, that makes a lot of sense to connect those two things, let's make this available through HHS.
Mhm.
It does require some resource internally to do.
Or you have an unsupported landing area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I think
So-
that's
so-
more
so
likely.
if
We
you're-
wouldn't
so-
want to, if you waited for us, you'd be waiting forever.
So if
It's
you-
true, I mean, we can be nimble and agile in certain respects, but I think a lot of times you want to just let the community run with something, and then, you come to stuff like this and you talk about it, so, go ahead, Dave, I'm sorry.
So basically to echo what Dan was saying, yeah, if you're waiting on, to get somebody to accept a pull request, we don't know what resources we have, but this model, what we started off with, is much more open in that it's, the pattern is a wiki, basically. You can submit whatever you want, right? You can upload whatever you want. The wiki itself is a repository, right? So you could manipulate it as much as you want as well. It just doesn't require a pull request. But I think it's actually fantastic because what you're saying is that there are plenty of opportunities where people already have their kind of use case solved, right? And they want to kind of contribute that knowledge base, and then other people can come, maybe we can index it on healthdata.gov and build on that, right? So everything is cumulative.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I'm curious, so for this initial list of use cases in this group that you've been engaging with, how did you sort of select the people you've been doing outreach to? What sorts of data users have you been targeting? What kind of cross-section are you shooting for?
So, I'd like to think that we have an advantage from some of the other agencies where healthcare is a relatively tight-knit community, and there are plenty of opportunities, plenty of programs where we could go to, and basically meet the user. So every time we pitch this, there are some use cases that can come out of the woodwork. I think Lloyd just gave me three a few minutes ago. But we've been having ongoing dialogue with pretty much all of the largest health technology incubators and accelerators. We've been to any number of health-related conferences. So it's really about getting the word out and getting somebody's attention long enough to explain what this is and how it's different.
How do you, sort of as the intermediary, but articulate to the data owner in a way that actually gets them to respond? What are the arguments that, do you say this is a administration priority? Do you say, here's the use case? What are the things that end up?
That is a spectacular question. I was wondering when somebody's going to, congratulations. So that was the thing that I was really trying to figure out. Because unlike before, this is not a mandate, right? There's no regulation involved. We're not. So we have to find some way to get them interested. And what it comes down to is finding the win-win relationship. And sometimes it's enough motivation, right? So sometimes they see right away, oh, you know what, we really would love to know how people are actually using it. But I think in other cases, it might be perhaps a little bit of public shaming. So if this is basically out there and very obvious, then it becomes a little bit harder to ignore it, right? So you know that the reason that we have that at-a-glance graph, I never explained it to you today, is you can see, you can see who is being bad. Where it turns red, so each one of these you see that has kind of the green with a U that's for user, and the O's are data owner. The parts that turn red are the ones where we have not gotten an adequate response for a while. And so, we figure with enough visibility into this, that plus the win-win relationship, that should be enough to get people to act. And the other thing that actually nobody asked, so I'll just say it. We're not guaranteeing that these will be done. All of the decisions are made at the level of the data owners. And what we're providing to them are the tools, the methodologies, and that signal that they need. Now, what they do with the signal is something completely different. They may choose to take into account what is the cost of implementing the solution, what is the risk in terms of re-identification of the data, perhaps a risk of putting wrong data out there. How closely does this request meet agency mission or organizational priorities? And any one of those could be sufficient to say, you know what, we can't do this right now, or we can do it maybe partially. But the most important part in that equation is that the decision is documented and that everybody knows what it is.
So another component to answer your first question was the part that he talked about at the very beginning, where you document the value of this data to your business or whatever, is also part of the selling point. There's a lot of really dedicated people across all of the departments in government, and they want to feel that the things that they are doing are impactful across the market, and helping them to see more directly that this is what the use case is and here's how it's valuable. And if they see it as something that is going to be game-changing in terms of entirety of their industry or just better utilization of their resources, then they find a reason to spend the time to do it, that's going to be incredibly valuable. So I think that's a really key component of this. The story, data can be boring if you're not telling a story. And it's the visualization that helps you to tell the story. It's the telling you the provenance of the data from the department that is part of the data story. And if we then can tell that piece of the story at the back end, which is the data is out there, but here's how we'd love for you to make it better because that helps us take this next leap in innovation based on your data sets, that's also part of the story that's incredibly valuable. And I think it also sort of supports that unfunded sort of mandate piece of it. You're telling me to open my data, but I got so many other things to do. I have no resources to do that. This proved to me that there is some value in me spending more time in making this data this incremental bit better. And if you can draw that calculation of incremental bit better to exponential benefit on the outside, I think that that's incredibly valuable as well. So that'll be, it doesn't always have to be this heavy hand, this is the Secretary's office saying, thou shalt. A lot of times you want to create allies with your compadres across the department, and you don't want to alienate them by coming down with this heavy hand. You want to be in partnership to sell the reasons why you want to do these things.
So you started to answer it. So it's what happens when just the value proposition isn't enough? They pretty much up to them whether or not they want to release the data. But is there like a minimum threshold that has to be met? Is it purely discretionary? I don't know if you've even run into that problem yet.
So we didn't want to get into. Let me show you this. Really quick. So we didn't want to get into the business of being the gatekeeper.
Right.
So we don't want to, as soon as a use case is put in, say, I don't know, this kind of sounds not so good. Our first job is to first understand exactly what the data user is trying to say, and then find and engage the data owner, and let them make the decision whether it's important enough or not. The only time that we might, in effect, filter things is when we have multiple users asking for the same thing. And in that case, I actually just had two companies who are asking for Medicare Part D claims data, so it's drug claims data. And it was virtually identical, so we put it all together.
So, and just to clarify, is this the only way HHS is opening its data now? It's based on these value propositions? Do they have some other just general published by default kind of standard?
Open data is part of HHS now.
Right.
You know, healthdata.gov has well over 1,000 data sets from across the department, and we're continuing to try to find data sets, but we're also
and
trying
this is
to.
a supplemental effort.
This is, yeah, so one of the things our CTO, Brian Sivak, has basically said, you know, if we, hypothetical conversation, but he said, if we never released another data set, one of the things that we could probably do is still find value in making the data sets that we have out there better by virtue of involving a greater community. So this is a bit of a community development effort as well as a data enhancement effort. So the open data agenda at the department is very robust, and it is by no means driven.
I didn't
by
mean to
this.
imply
This
that
is
it wasn't.
supplemental,
Yeah, sure.
for sure.
Right.
So, but it's an exciting thing because it then helps us to get a finger on the pulse of what actually is happening out there and what people are really interested in out of some of our data sets. We usually sort of just wait for the health data palooza to have people come from all over the place and tell us what kinds of things they're interested in with regard to the data. But this is going to be an ongoing sort of platform upon which people can have this conversation with the department about where they'd like to see data enhancement, or just sometimes, as David alluded to, there's just better promotion of data assets that actually already exist. So.
Yeah, that's the part we get excited by the most, because it's hardly any investment and huge returns. So how are you guys going to go out there and use this?
One more question. Do you have like a great success story or that of like a data set that people requested that you guys were able to open, or is it too new to sort of have an example to point to? Clearly you have a lot of requests, but any of them
Right.
completely
Well,
done.
the fact that Google is indexing all these answers, I think is great. I had like no idea until like I was looking for something else. I was like, wait a minute, this is my stuff. And I think one of the greatest, I think it's a success story, is that we got the data owners to commit to a release date. Nobody knew that something was coming down. They wouldn't know who to tell, right? And now they have an interested party, and they say, you know what, we will deliver that in June. And moreover, this organization is, they're willing to work with HHS to basically do pre-release validation on the data, and in that case, everybody wins.
Sorry, just follow up. When you say pre-release validation, does that mean everyone who's watching GitHub gets to see that pre-release, or is it maybe done in private?
So if you sign up, so really funny. I can't tell you the number of people who ask, all right, so if I make the request, this is just for me, right? Nobody else can see this. Or, okay, well, can I at least have a 6-month meeting? And I even got this request from data transparency advocates. But basically,
Limited access to the data.
the answer is, philosophically, we can't advantage one organization against another. So everything that we make available to you, we make available to everybody else. Historically, we found a lot of examples of people kind of, I don't know if abusing FOIA is the right term, but using the fact that FOIA takes a long time and is completely not transparent, and you can't see the decisions that are being made or the data that's being published. They use that as their competitive advantage. So they're competing on the availability of information. And what we're saying is, when information becomes available to one, it becomes available to everybody. What you need to compete on is the analytics or your secret sauce, not on the availability of the data.
So the pre-release data will be published in the GitHub issue, not emailed to the person who's going to validate?
No email. No, as a matter of fact, so one of our staunchest supporters, we have an organization that's like so excited to get us at the FDA. They said, All right, no more email, because they already have people emailing them all the time, asking them for all sorts of things. They're saying, just I want everything in GitHub. I want everything to be out there and visible.
I was wondering if any states or private corporations have data that they've collected on health-related data, and they say, oh, well, this is a great approach that the government is doing. Let me contribute my data into this data source so I can put it out there. Like, you know, you see national leadership, and then you see states trying to meet up or, you know, follow best practices. I don't know if there's Medicaid
I think you just
data.
described healthdata.gov, and that's...
Oh,
Yeah,
That's next
that
month.
is-
Don't talk about it yet.
I know,
You guys need to come.
Yes.
I'm starting to think I don't need to come back anymore.
Come next month.
Oh.
None of you guys can come back next month. We've done a lot to try to find data across the federal space. We've done a lot to try to find data across states and localities. And a perfect example, our buddies at Socrata have got a lot of people whom they have implemented at the state and localized levels. And because they're producing structured output out of those catalogs, we're able to ingest those catalogs into healthdata.gov and show more than just the federal data sets. Because I think you could all acknowledge, like, healthcare is a local thing.
Right.
Anytime somebody brings up a map about healthcare, I look straight to Maryland to see where we rank. Because that's the way we see healthcare, and that's what is effective for us, healthcare at a local level. So we definitely try to find the data sources from the local producers. And we also try to be in conversation with them as much as possible. Usually it's more at forums like this. I think they, as much as we, are challenged to be in a conversation all over the place. But we definitely try to stay in touch with what kinds of things are transpiring at the local level. Provide leadership, but also take feedback, because they are often very, very good about building community around the data, because there's lots of local civic hacking types of things happening all the time. And so it can be very easy to sort of coalesce a community around local issues. It's a little bit more challenging at a national level because the data sets are so broad and they're at population levels, and but it's been an interesting activity to be in sort of both camps, I think.
And can you trust the states, the data they provide, or do they ever make it look, you know, oh, this looks, crime isn't so bad?
That's I think everybody who is putting out open data is trying to put their best foot forth. I would love to see the state who is trying to make something look a little bit better than it is, because I think a lot of times in these open data spaces, what folks are trying to show is this is the reality of what we've got.
Right.
And if it's crime or health, population health or whatever, most of the time folks are saying, here's what we've got, help us figure out how to make this better. Or the administration, the governor's office, the mayor, whatever, is focused on these initiatives, and those are the spots where we're trying to make these things better. But we also don't necessarily scrutinize their data. We take it as it is, and when we at healthdata.gov end up redirecting you to their site. So you're going to land there anyway. Healthdata.gov is really a catalog and discovery zone, and we're trying to build it into a more comprehensive catalog that's going to allow you to do more stuff. But for right now, you're going to end up on their site anyway. So we just want to help you to find all of these data resources so you can wrap your mind around your problem, find the resources that may be available to help you solve them. They may be ours, they may be LA's or New York's, whatever.
You actually reminded me, you know, we have a lot of smart people in this room, and one of the things that I wanted everybody to kind of hopefully contribute is think about the process that we presented here, think about the tool set, and, you know, let us know what you think, what you might do better. I mean, this is an ongoing project. It started relatively recently, and it's going to be evolving. And I think the more insights and input we have from the community, the better. And, you know, I mean, heck, if you have enough time and want to develop something more purpose-built, we'd love to get you on board as well. And finally, one more thing. Obviously, this is an initiative from HHS. There is nothing specific to this concept that makes it only HHS domain, so it could be applied more broadly as well.
Absolutely. Tell other departments that you're interested in their data from. Let them know that this is something that they might consider doing. We are by no means trying to maintain some kind of proprietary control over this. If this is going to make open data better across the government, that would be actually the best thing possible. So definitely spread the word if it's something that you think other people could use at the local level as well. Cool.
Great.
So, very exciting. We got a taste of what we'll talk about next month, so I encourage everyone to come on May 28th, it's a Thursday. Thank you everyone for coming. Big thanks to David Portnoy for coming all the way to Chicago. So again, if you have any federal open data contacts, please send them my way. My business card's at the back. I'm not kicking you out right now. Feel free to hang around and talk and grab some food. Thanks for coming.